and we are back. Welcome to, I guess, the first proper full episode of the Built Environment Marketing Show in 2025. So we are changing things up slightly and we are going to be doing everything in, I guess, themes. So to kick us off, we have our first theme, which is all around sustainability. I will be doing a number of interviews and solo episodes all around sustainability, communications, marketing, and climate change, I guess. And I'm going to get a range of guests to talk about this topic from different angles. And I hope that, I guess, it gives you more depth and more insight into a particular topic and is still really valuable and useful to you. Hopefully you like this new approach. So, my first guests are Rosie Cade from Rising Tide and Brigitte Clements, who owns her own practice and is also a sustainability and transformation consultant. So, I thought both of these two would work really well together because they are both, I guess, forces in what they do and the space. And in terms of what we talk about in the episode, we start to look at their backgrounds and how they got into what they do, because I think that's really useful to us marketers, especially us who want to do more in this space. We also look at the role of marketing in sustainability and climate transformation. We give some tips on how to effectively communicate around sustainability. And then we start to look at the challenges. There are a lot of challenges in terms of sustainability marketing, not least the American election. We also talk about networks and collaboration and how they're so important in terms of making change happen. And finally, we talk about retrofit and sustainability in housing. So it's a jam-packed episode and it's slightly longer than normal. So it's actually going to be split across 2 weeks. The next episode on this one will be out next week. So yeah, enjoy part 1. Take care. Bye. Hello and welcome to the Built Environment Marketing Show. Would you like to introduce yourself? Rosie, you can go first. Who are you? Where do you come from? What do you do?
Hi, I'm Rosie. I am a built environment specialist. I've got about 20 years, which makes me feel quite old, working in comms for developers, investors, and neighborhoods as well. And I am now building Rising Tide to focus on industry transformation. And by that, we mean strategies to move the sector to being more resilient and more positive, particularly focusing on climate and social impact. And it's an amazing sector, we've got brilliant people, lots happening to move it forward, but we need to move faster. And so we've got a network of really great consultants under our banner. We're currently working with some ambitious developers and impact funders and designers and some membership networks, and we're helping them, I guess, influence the status quo, tell the stories of their innovation and finance and policy and kind of technical solutions. So, yeah.
And make it appeal to actual people, because that's the thing I always think is missing. You're like, come on, it's for people and the planet. Brigitte, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hello. So my name is Brigitte Clements. I've got quite a plural background, so it's stitched together. I think before, I am an architect developer, but before studying architecture and getting involved in this world, I was in the humanitarian field, and then I went into environmental and energy studies, so climate science. I've got a science background. And I used architecture as my medium to, I guess, address, the social and environmental things' importance to me. And so I do run a practice. I've got some buildings here and abroad, which are quite sweet and lovely. On top of that, I do a lot in academia. I teach. I'm running a master's program at the moment at a university here in London. And I am actually having a career pivot. So for the last 5 years, I've been involved with ACAN, which is the Architects Climate Action Network. And it's a really inspiring, amazing network of volunteers basically in the built environment, driving climate action. And this is through policy shaping campaigns, developing, educational tools and resources. So really, really amazing. They're big hitters. And but more recently, I'm doing a lot more in climate diplomacy and climate I guess, negotiating. So it was interesting being involved in this marketing podcast, because I was thinking I'm not really, I don't do the kind of PR comms thing very well, but I'd say in my everyday, it's actually the only thing that I do is crafting scenarios and storytelling and getting buy-in from people, and finding a great way to communicate that. So that's kind of my thing.
It's so funny because I know I was looking at your LinkedIn profile. It's like climate diplomacy, and it's not a term I'd heard of before. But actually, when you think about it, a lot of it boils down to communication and stories, and it really is. And a lot of the transformation that you're also talking about, Rosie, as well, is also communications, and stories are going to be a vital part of that as well, to kind of get the message out and get people on board and in order to transform, because that's kind of what we need to kind of take people with us, rather than people running scared from change, which is basically what a lot of the climate stuff needs, right?
I mean, I do think a lot of this is framing, and I think that because it's this world has moved so quickly in this, and it's impossible to have your finger on everything. So I think that there's a lot of slight imposter syndrome. I think a lot of people who are very passionate and interested in things feel that they, don't have a right to speak up or frame things because they don't know everything, which is an impossibility. But being able to bring things together, know what questions to ask, and how to kind of find a strategy through that, I think is actually very empowering.
So Rosie, for you, why is, I guess, marketing's role, and what do marketing professionals, what do they need to understand about sustainability and climate to kind of be more involved, do you think, in your opinion?
I think often sustainability stuff isn't really that complicated. It's just more and more, it just seems like kind of basic common sense and definitely basic business sense. I think, though, if it seems quite overwhelming, just what I've learned is just keep asking yourself why, and keep asking yourself kind of who needs to know about this, who stands to gain from this, who will lose out from this. So you start kind of talking about the reason for transition or the need for transition. And you need to really sell that story. And yeah, I think we kind of forget this a little bit. We sort of assume that if we say that transition is needed, then we'll all follow suit. But we have to keep telling the story about why
it's important to different people.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense. And in terms of, I guess, being able to talk about sustainability, I mean, are there any tips from you, Brigitte, when if you're not necessarily a fully trained scientist or whatever, and you're trying to talk about these issues, any kind of ideas on how to kind of, I guess, get people to be on your side or be involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you need to tailor what you're talking about to your audience, right? And who is going to benefit from whatever it is that you're talking about, right? So, if you're talking to developers, maybe you need to shift your focus on, return on investment, cost, efficiencies, marketability. If you're talking to end users or tenants, I think you could talk about the value of health and well-being, comfort, affordability. Policymakers, you're looking for social impact, regulatory compliance, these kinds of things. So I think one is shifting your narrative to the people that you're, who are going to be impacted by it. But you don't need data and facts and statistics, right? We need to be able to emotionally relate to things, right? So, I mean, obviously that needs to be underpinned by, facts and knowledge. But I think the storytelling element and the framing of it is really important. So, I mean, I think if we look beyond our industry, you have a lot of naysayers, and you have a lot of people that will always kind of throw a little bomb in the works, and they'll say, the majority of our energy comes from fossil fuels, so we're not going to change. And, it's true. If you look at the statistics, it's like, I think it's 80% of global energy consumption is from fossil fuels. I mean, that's horrendous, right? However, if you look at global investment into the energy sector, last year that was $3 trillion, and of that, $2 trillion was spent on renewables. That shows a market shift. Next year, they project that to be 70% of all investment. So what you're seeing is both are true, but what side are you kind of framing? And what you do need to do is capture people's imagination, I think, because people want to be a part of something, and you need to frame it in a way that people can get buy-in and run with it and do something about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think all businesses are going to have to adapt what they're doing, right, to kind of new ways of delivering product, new ways of organizing themselves. And marketing is really key to that because we're natural promoters, but also we help clients understand the market, where they should position themselves in it, how to sort of drive demand for the good stuff they're doing so that it actually is kind of profitable, because I think that will shift things much more quickly. So I think marketing's right at the heart.
And as a marketeer, what things can we be doing to kind of upskill ourselves? Because I think a lot of people want to kind of know I've got a certificate or something that says I've done it before they actually do it, which I don't always think is right, to be honest. But I always think once you start doing it, you can learn it literally on the job. That's how I learn a lot of stuff. Are there particular things we can be doing, Rosie?
I mean, I do read a lot. I'm a bit of a geek because I want to know what I'm talking about. So I'm reading about asset managers at the moment, and I've been reading a lot about circularity. So I don't just spout the buzzwords. I actually have some depth behind it. Obviously, there's some amazing podcasts. It's generally like ironing or at the gym. And yeah, some really good like short courses, like a couple of weeks or a month. It's not something you have to commit to forever. But I think also talking to people, and even quite senior people, I've been quite surprised. You say at the end of the meeting, can I just ask you the difference between an investment manager and a fund manager? And they're generally like really happy to explain. And like some of the stuff that Brigitte and I were talking about, we met like specific kind of bio-based material questions, like how do you really use bamboo? Is it really strong? And just like having the humility to ask those questions when you're authentically interested in something, I think has really helped me.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's so cool and so true. And I think that thing about not being afraid to ask, I always say, don't be afraid to ask those stupid or seemingly stupid questions, because I think that is how we all learn as well. And you're right about senior leaders. They're always happy that you're interested, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and totally. I think sometimes we are the people in the meetings that are asking the questions, and it's actually really helpful for everyone else in the meeting. And you do it from a comms point of view, don't you? I had a meeting yesterday, which was a kind of 2-hour meeting. And at the end, I just put my hand up and said, can I just really check we all know like why we're doing this, who we're trying to target? Which may have seemed a stupid question, but that's a core marketing question. And like really helped me understand the brief a bit better.
But also, I think you asking that question, it also helps frame that meeting. They understand it better, because I think it's so easy to come away from that brief as well. And in terms of kind of your learning style, what's your learning style, Brigitte? Honest question. She's like, I
don't. No, I mean, as you know, Io, I'm out chatting to people all the time. I'm inherently curious, and so I go to a lot of talks. I meet with a lot of people. I learn best actually through learning with people, but also podcasts. I think I like to go into realms that I don't know that much about. So I'm kind of always exploring the kind of other things outside of the built environment, because I'm a kind of more high level, strategic level, systems level type of thinker, right? So I like to see how everything kind of fits together. So I find people who I find are magicians in their field and very inspirational and very good, and I follow them. Specifically around politics or economics or social sciences, I think are also very, very interesting. But I think with my work, I have managed to carve out a kind of role where I get to interview a lot of people, and so I'm constantly learning in this way. But it's so dynamic, it's so interesting, right? So it's endless. I mean, I was at Future Build this week, and it's every time I'm learning. And I find it very interesting because I think since, Rosie and I have been in this field for 20 years, right, we're considered experts. And, that's always kind of a bit of a shock, because you think, God, if I'm an expert, then but I think, we get to the point where we at least know what questions to ask. So I think it's easier for us maybe because we got to build on knowledge and we know how to push and pull on things. We're not so susceptible to kind of, I guess, greenwashing. But yeah, I think it's quite tough when you're at the very, very beginning and you're trying to learn things. So I think in that way, you need to, I would say, you start on your specific thing that you're looking into. If it's, retrofits, what is it that you're trying to achieve with this, and how do you connect into that? But I would also say, Sorry, I'm going on a bit, but plug into networks. People are really, really happy to talk. And I'm sorry, I'm going to do a plug here, but I
Go
am.
for it.
For example, ACAN, which is a network, and it's not just architects. It's everyone from policymakers to educators to engineers to people marketing, and it's an amazing dynamic network where people come to share ideas, ask questions, drive campaigns, drop off, some of their knowledge that they're not able to, exploit and take action on in their professional lives. And I think it's just a very empowering place where you get to kind of, breathe out with other people. I think especially, I'm going to be a bit divisive here and say, in this age of LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn, but I don't really use it. I find it quite an insular, exclusionary place, right? It's really about the me and look how impressive I am and look at my certificates and my credentials rather than a genuine collaborative space, right?
Do you want to tell us a bit more about ACAN?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a network under various themes, right? So you have everything from education to climate justice to natural materials to a circular economy. So if you're interested in any of these themes, you can get involved in them. But I think that we're kind of living in this era where we are supposed to present ourselves as experts, and we're expected to, by ourselves, have this inherent knowledge that we just kind of expound. And that's unrealistic, but it's also very isolating. And we're not going to address the climate crisis alone behind our computers in our living rooms, right? It's not going to happen. So I think plugging into a network and making, yourself more fluent with other people doing amazing things, it will naturally breathe in more information and knowledge into what you're doing. And you might not know everything, but you'll know actually where to go to. So that's how I learn.
Yeah, and I really like the fact of kind of bringing different vibes into different spaces. So you'll hear about a really amazing community project or an amazing retrofit festival, for example, and it just sounds so rich and warm and positive. And then you walk into a finance room and there's this expectation that everything's going to be very dry and very technical and very serious. And it's kind of like, nah, it's all about vibes, this transition. I know that sounds totally hippie, but it is, because at the end of the day, we're humans, and you cannot get somebody excited about something. They'll pretend to be excited about it. They'll pretend to be on board.
Yeah.
Unless they're genuinely, I often ask this with marketing communication stuff. If I read that, would I actually be interested and excited and delighted? Or not. And if I'm not, then it's I'm never going to remember it and I'm never going to act on it. So I think we need to be a bit more authentic.
Hi, it's Io here, and I just wanted to interrupt the show quickly to say a bit more about what I do. I'm a digitally led marketing consultant, and I specialise in working with built environment firms just like yours. I think there's so much more that AEC firms can do to make the most of the digital marketing opportunity. And if it's something that you would like to explore working with me, how to make the best of online and in-person worlds, then do get in touch. Email me at io, which is AYO, at abbasmarketing.com, and let's have a chat.
I did a systems change program that was kind of organized by the UKGBC, and with a now colleague, Emily Rose, we decided to kind of run with our theme, which was regenerative finance, because we're nerdy and we really get excited by this. So we don't have a finance or economics background. We're just interested, and we've just been plowing through and presenting stuff. And, we have architecture background, so we're quite good at presenting and organizing things. So we've been invited to speak at a couple of finance things. And we're like, the caveat is that we are not experts, right? We're very clear about that. And what's happened is that a lot of finance people are not very good at presenting.
No.
They're pretty dry. And so we have inadvertently turned into the punk of going through these talks and saying look, we don't really know. You need to investigate this, but these are all of our links. We open source all of our knowledge anyway, but we kind of frame this, and people all of a sudden, at the end, you go for your canapes after. And people kind of beeline for us because we make finance exciting. But it's true. It's really, I mean, it's amazing, this whole thing about vibe. Rosie, you're totally bang on. I mean, I find it very funny, but it's true. You need to be able to engage in a topic and a theme.
And I guess as well for climate, what we need is like finance. We need to look at policy. These are all relatively dry topics, right? But it's like, how do you make it in a way that is accessible to people so they actually care and want to do something about it, I guess, isn't it?
But this is the fun part of your job, right? Like this is like, how do you, I mean, you need to get a bit forensic about how you approach these things. And I think, was it Rory Stewart in one of his podcasts was saying that he really thinks that we need to become, better orators. And it's true, like as a society, we do need to be able to communicate better. But I think, because we're talking about such big, broad things, and then, our arguments quite quickly gets undermined by some really, really small example that you can't really, buffer in real time. But I think you need to sit there and figure out your storytelling strategy. It's, when we look and project on the future and, this green transition, quite often it's an impossibility of it. It's really negative. It's, it's going to cost too much. What's going to happen to X, Y, Z? And you can look at historical evidence. And if you sit there and go, look, 10 years ago, on The Economist and FT and the reputable, publications, they were saying that, the transition to renewables is not going to happen because it's inaffordable. And then you sit there and go, but the cost of PV has dropped by 85% in that time. Wind by half. I mean, battery technology, 80% and growing. I mean, it's spurned off a whole new economy around it. So I think finding your way into be able to explain this is the exciting part of marketing.
This is the challenge, right? I think exactly, you've hit the nail on the head. We've got this big need, this big shift, but the way we're going to get there is a kind of like creating this ecosystem of people and solutions and taking all the steps together. But that's quite small and incremental and gets you into the weeds. So you've got to figure out a way of joining those together that's really compelling. I personally think we need to spend quite a lot more time working on what we're talking about when we say we're going to go somewhere new and better, like the vision piece. I even hate using that word vision because it's been so kind of co-opted and greenwashed. But what will it look like when we've solved this? Because we're brilliant humans and we've put a man on the moon and all the rest of it, and we will solve this. But what's it going to be like when we get there? Like, what's it going to feel like? What's our day-to-day going to be like?
Yeah.
What are the pluses going to be? Then there will be some minuses. I think we have to be realistic. It's not all going to be totally rosy. But I feel like we haven't spent enough time painting the picture. And so, of course, if you're asking people to take a step into the relative unknown and the infrastructure perhaps isn't there yet for them to change their lives completely, like without something really compelling, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I always find that people don't really want to spend time on that, figuring out the visions, the harder stuff of like what the real final outcome is of any activity. And I think that's one of the issues we have is like, how do we say to people, this is valuable because people need something to work towards, which is basically what you're saying, and to actually buy into, isn't it?
And like, who should be doing that? Is that something that should be on the government's plate to kind of tell that story? Or I'm a bit skeptical about whether they'll have time for that.
I think it's happening in multiple plural levels already, right? I mean, it's, I quite often slip out. I think what I like about my practice work is that I spend time with, the builders and the contractors and the investors and the developers and the real estate agents and the, insurance brokers. And because they kind of bring me back to earth that not everyone is working on the climate crisis. Not everybody is fluent about it. Because in my world, especially with ACAN and a lot of the kind of practice that I do, everyone is, right? And the people that, hire me, to do these kind of strategy things are working on, innovations that are mind-blowing. I mean, we're talking, hydrogen fuels for aviation or, new battery storage that's kind of going to blow apart, what we have right now. Really amazing innovations, right? And the fact is that people in government are doing it, people in industry are doing it, and private citizens are doing it. If we look at where we were 10 years ago, to where we are now, it's astonishing. That's something we're not talking about, is actually how quickly this transition is happening. And, we look at things like, what's happening across the pond, and, Mr. Trump, his stance on anything related to anything I believe in. But is it going to slow things down, especially over there? Yeah, it's a tragedy. But is it going to stop it? No. And and I think it might actually speed things up in other parts of the world, because people now have to take a stance, and people need to drive forward to what that means. And so I think it's asking who's going to do it. I think it's a moot point. I think we can only control what we do and who we're around. And I think it's really interesting to see how quickly dominoes fall when people get engaged in this. I mean, I've just seen. I mean, ACAN has moved from I think it was 4 or 5 people that met an Extinction Rebellion protest in 5 years ago, and now it's thousands and thousands of people in 15 countries. It's amazing.
There's definitely the kind of power in numbers creating a network. It's similar to the Don't Waste Buildings network, which I'm part of. And that started organically decided to build kind of, without going for funding or being sponsored or anything like this, but just by doing really good, interesting stuff and being right. And yeah, I mean, we've got hundreds of members now, and we're engaging with policy. And it's a thing. It's a brand. It's got a LinkedIn platform. People are engaged with it. And it's starting to become a topic of conversation that's not weird or eco. It's just kind of normality and the right thing to do, because we've got lots of different voices under the umbrella saying a similar thing.
And you're doing tours to show people what's possible as well, aren't you? So come and see this building, have a look around, and all of that, which is amazing.
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. I think people really love the I've always thought this. It's early days working with developers and builders. Take them to site, show them stuff. People at King's Cross, we used to have hoardings. We punched kind of little holes in them so you could look through to the construction site. People are just fascinated by the process.
Yeah, because people just don't understand what goes on a construction site. And it's just that thing when you open the world and open the doors to it, and people go, oh, so what? You can really retain this, and this is how it's done. And, you don't often know the state of a building until you crack it open, and all this kind of, it's amazing. Thanks so much for listening to the Built Environment Marketing Show. Don't forget to check out the show notes, which will have useful links and resources connected to this episode. You can find that on abbasmarketing.com. And of course, if you like the show, please do share it with others on social, as it helps more people to find us. See you soon.